So welcome everyone, good afternoon. And this program is So You're Highly Sensitive, Now What? And it's part 2. We did have a part 1 in person on Tuesday. That one was not recorded. It's a great question someone asked. This one is, I think for the part 2, we decided to just record this one because Tammy is just kind of going a lot more in depth. And I think there's a little bit of crossover information, but she will.
Yeah, but there are slides available. So if anybody wants slides from the first presentation, I'm happy to share those.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Tammy. And this is presented by Tammy Goen. My name is Laurel, and I'm part of the events team at the library. Every month we offer a variety of free programs available, and we have a wonderful lineup this month and next month. You can find more of our free programming on our web calendar at DeschutesLibrary.org/calendar, or by picking up a printed events guide at your library branch. As a highly sensing person, HSP, Tammy understands what it's like to navigate the non-highly sensitive world. She uses a mind, body, spirit focus and the use of art and connection with nature, as well as mindful practices, meditation, energy work, and EFT tapping to help other highly sensitive people minimize overwhelm and develop self-compassion and embrace their trait. She's a best-selling contributing author, has an app for highly sensitivity, and a weekly TV series for HSPs. She works with clients in her home studio outside of Sun River and online. Thank you, Tammy, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I kind of refer to myself as like the secret weapon for highly sensing folks that are struggling with overwhelm or conflict, or kind of stuck in self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So I really enjoy helping people get beyond the struggle piece of things and really embracing being highly sensing and what that means, what that offers for us, because it really is a gift, and helping them to make that their superpower and move forward. And part of that is recognizing what all of the good parts are that people might not be aware of, because we can get bogged down in the not accepted, not fun part of it. So my quick background, I learned about the trait maybe 12, 13 years ago, just through someone trying to help me through a situation. And I took an inventory, and I do have a PDF version of my own inventory if you're interested, that I can pass along. And then also on my website, just on the main page, if you want to take an inventory, because it's really, really helpful to validate what you're going through, your experience in the world, and then be able to just kind of reframe from that perspective of saying, oh, okay, wait, it's not just me. There's a reason for the way that I do things and see things and experience things in the world. All right, so now, what can I do with that? So very, very helpful. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is just help people along that journey. So before we talk about what do we do with this now, I'll just briefly mention some of the challenges to see, if this stuff kind of resonates with you, or maybe if you're kind of trying to figure out if this is you or not, high sensory or not. This might kind of bring some things into clarity, but I won't spend a lot of time on it. But some of the challenges that we might run into are things like feeling alone or misunderstood, outside the box completely, maybe even weird or crazy. And sometimes we've heard those terms growing up, so it's easy for us to own those and kind of perpetuate that experience. And then we're probably tired of hearing throughout our life, we're too sensitive, or not enough this way, or we need to do this, we need to grow a thicker skin. Those are definitely some of the challenges that we face, especially with the way other people see our behaviors, especially if they're not aware, this is the way we are for a particular reason. And it really is, it's a genetic trait. It's the way we're born. We're just wired this way. So it has, this is the way we view life and experience life. So we can also run into overwhelm and exhaustion and even illness, because we will push ourselves, but we really need some time to regroup and to be able to approach things in a certain way so that we don't become overwhelmed and exhausted. But that is something that, majority of people that come to work with me are in that place of just like, I have no energy left. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just exhausted all the time. And then we do have a tendency to feel other people's energy, or the energy of a room or a situation, or the global happenings of the world. So that can really be heavy and weigh on us. We can have really intense feelings, and sometimes that's just really hard to manage. So some of us have learned how to shut down our feelings. And so then we are like out of touch with our feelings, even though they're happening and they're super intense. We don't know how to express them, or it's just challenging for us because we've tried to tamp those down. And then we do have a tendency to hold on to things. And you've probably heard, if you're highly sensing, this from other people. It's like, just let it go. It's no big deal. That was one of the big things for me when I was first learning about the trait, because I was having this struggle with my friend and business partner at the time. And I kept hearing that, just let it go. That's in the past. So we do have a tendency to hold on to things, to kind of perseverate, think of all of the different possibilities. And one thing that's always really great to remember is that there's an unlimited number of possibilities of all these things that can go wrong or that aren't okay, but there are an equal number of those possibilities of the positive side, the things that could go right or that could be really great. So it's good to connect with those as much as possible. And then a couple other things, we can take a long time to make decisions. We can have this need to be perfect, to doubt ourselves if we're not perfect. We don't like to have other people upset with us. We don't like to upset other people. And then, not that finally, there's lots of other things that we can run into as challenges, but we can have that sense of we need to be different or fixed or somehow completely do something drastic to be different than who we are in order to fit in, to be successful, for people to like us, et cetera. So that can definitely be a hurdle to overcome. So before I move into benefits, are there any questions, Laurel, to answer so far?
No questions so far, but please feel free to put any questions throughout that pop up for you in the Q&A or chat, and I'll relay them to Tammy.
Yeah, perfect. So I do want to talk some about benefits, because sometimes people are not in touch with the good side of this trait. And it really is a gift. It is our superpower if we manage things and have the right tools, and then we have that right mindset. But some of the things that are really work well, or that people like about us that we do, or that we're good at, we don't make that association with high sensitivity. It's just how we are. So we don't even consider that. So it's good to recognize, that some of that stuff is there because we are highly sensitive. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment as we talk about these, and you can just kind of have this to view a little bit higher. There we go. And feel free to, you can take screenshots or whatever, but I can also provide this if you want to reach out and ask to have a copy. So our ability to see things from all sides can bog us down, but it can be really, really amazing. And if we look at it as a gift, as a skill, then that can be really helpful, especially in the work arena. Because we can see things from all sides, we can often catch things that other people don't, and we can have all of the information that we need to finish a project, say, or to help people with something. We can say, hey, what about this, this, and this? And a lot of times those are others who are not highly sensing, or just not in that mode. They would not have even come up with those things. So it can be a real benefit, and it's a great skill if we acknowledge that is part of who we are as highly sensing people, is that we have this really great ability. We also have a level of compassion, which I talked about in the first presentation, the difference between having compassion and empathy. And we tend to have a high level of both of those, compassion and empathy. Compassion is really, really helpful for us putting ourselves in someone else's shoes and understanding what people need. We tend to be those that people turn to when they need something, or even if it's just a hug, or to be understood and heard and not judged, or have some kind of idea that they haven't thought about, but also just that feeling from the heart. And so if we can focus on that compassion as opposed to the empathy, which is also high for us, but the empathy generally means that we're feeling what others are feeling, and that can be very challenging for us. It can be a drain on our emotions, and it doesn't really help anyone for us to suffer along with someone, to feel so deeply about or exactly like what that person is feeling. That really doesn't help us, for sure, and it usually doesn't help that person either. But if we can stand back and say, okay, I have this high level of compassion, let's really use that and kind of distance myself, but say, okay, I have compassion, I get it, and I know what this person needs. So let me help that way. So that's a really strong skill. And then this one, if you think about your favorite artist or writer, creator of any kind, it generally in the general population, we're likely to be 20 to 30% of the population that are highly sensing. Within the creative realm, it's much, much higher than that, because that's one of the places that we're drawn not only to appreciate art and all of those artistic creative outlets, but we're drawn to participate in them, to have those skills. And so that's something that even if you aren't going to be doing that as your career or something that you're going to make money at, but it is really, resonates with you and creates a lot of satisfaction, that's a really good thing to be aware of, that connection, and incorporate that in your life as a self-care tool, as one of your activities when you just have some downtime, or something to just actually purposefully include in your life, in your lifestyle, your schedule, to maximize and connect with that part of you that's creative. And some people will say, oh, I couldn't draw to save my life. And so creativity doesn't necessarily mean artistic ability, although you're probably better than you think you are in comparison to whatever that expectation is for yourself. But just allowing yourself to experience that creative side in some way, some kind of project. Maybe it's cooking, maybe it's, some projects on the house or whatever. It could have nothing to do with art per se, but that creative side is really strong for us. So recognizing that as a strength and allowing that to bloom. And then some other benefits, we do enjoy really deep connections and meaningful conversations. We're usually not the chit chatty, like go to a party and, say the same thing to everyone, just kind of talk about the weather, which, if you live in this area, we have lots going on with the weather, but there's a lot more stuff to talk about. And we usually really like that deep interaction. So when people want that and they really want to connect with someone, they know usually that we're people to go to, because we really resonate with that. And then, as I mentioned, art, music, beauty, anything beautiful. And we tend to really have a really deep response to these things. I remember I have a friend who's highly sensing, and so is his son. And they went to the apex of our eclipse that we had here locally a few years ago. And he said it was really interesting that there's all these people having all these experiences, and they're all going, oh, this is amazing. And he and his son were just sitting there with tears streaming down their faces. And people would come up and say, you guys okay? I mean, this is cool, but really? So their experience, though, was so intense that, because it was just so beautiful and such a powerful, energetic experience. And so, maybe we can maybe seem weird sometimes to people, but having that appreciation, I think, just makes life so much richer. And so if we think about not being sensitive, or, wishing we weren't that way, these are some of the things that I'm talking about that we would really miss out on if we didn't have this sensitivity. So being able to honor and embrace and really appreciate these things is great. So we tend to be really good problem solvers, and to tend to know what is needed in a situation, what other people are needing, what will calm down a situation. All these things are really helpful in a work environment in particular, especially if you're working with employees underneath you, or you're in some kind of a group that you have to have decisions made. We tend to have that extra skill set of saying, okay, this person would do better with this style, this person with this style, how can we bring all that together? So we have a lot of strength in that. And because of that, in a way, seeing that from all sides, really focusing on equality, we tend to be really good at problem solving and being a good diplomat, really taking into consideration and having a different style of leadership. This is something that comes up a lot lately with HSPs who are in some kind of a leadership role, but they don't really know how they ever got that position, and they don't really feel qualified when they compare themselves to others, kind of a top-down kind of scenario, or not taking into consideration anything within the employee realm. It's just like what upper management says. So they compare themselves to that and feel that they fall short, but really they have so many skills as a leader because of all of these things that we're talking about. So being able to own and support yourself, for these skills is really important. So again, rich inner life, we have an outer experience of life that can be really rich, like the sunset or the eclipse. but our inner life tends to be really, really intense and enjoyable, if you will. We tend to have an easier time being on our own because we have less likelihood of being bored. I know a lot of HSPs will say, I'm never bored because there's so much going on up here. You know, my imagination just goes crazy, and I always have stuff to fill in the blank there. It's never really just quiet and boring. So we do have this rich imagination, and we tend to be those who are constantly learning, wanting to know more, expanding our horizons, if you will. So that's, I think, a fabulous, part of being highly sensing. And then this is a really key one that I like to talk on other times, more specifically, but we have this strong sense of intuition, and we can really connect deeply and have a lot of connection with our own answers. But at the same time, because we tend towards self-doubt and perfectionism and wanting to not upset anybody and all of those things, we can really shut out our intuition, not listen to it. But it really has a lot to tell us. And so I work with people really to try to zone in on your inner felt sense, your body's response, your visceral reaction to things, because that tells us what intuitively we know. And so really paying attention to that intuition and validating it and then following it instead of trying to quiet it or ignore it, which is quite common for us. And then we have this connection with nature and animals, which right now is super challenging because we have this smoke situation and we can't get outside as much as normal. But hopefully you normally, maximize this, trying to get out as much as possible to touch a tree or just go out somewhere in the quiet and spend a lot of time with your pets or watching the wildlife. Those tend to be really rewarding for us versus others who might just say, oh yeah, that's nice, but they don't really have that connection and that big experience like we do as highly sensitives. And then we do have a tendency to be more aware of ourselves, not just the environment, but a lot of self-awareness, wanting to expand our consciousness, wanting to learn more about ourselves. I think that's a unique thing for highly sensitives too. Not that there aren't some that are not highly sensing who want to know more about themselves, but that tends to be a real drive for us. And I think that's really valuable. So it's definitely, in my book, a real good benefit. We tend to be nurturing, know what others need, as I've already mentioned, just kind of the ones that are just there for others. And so again, in moderation, we need to have the boundaries set and all of those understandings for ourselves of how we approach the world with that, so that we don't overgive and deplete ourselves. But within those bounds, we're really great at helping. And so oftentimes we are in not only the arts, but the helping fields in some form or another. And again, having those boundaries and being prepared for that so that we don't overdo, really important. But and then in terms of the environmental input, we can get distracted easily if there's too much going on, to noises, lights, even textures, things like that are going to bother us. Then we'll be seemingly distracted, which I think is why a lot of times people get a misdiagnosis or just a misunderstanding that someone is like ADHD or something like that because they can't focus. But if they have the right environment, things would suddenly be very different. So if we have the right parameters, the right environment, we tend to be very, very good at staying on task, at really focusing, paying attention to detail. That's a real big, is that sensing the subtle, noticing all of the little things, things that other people probably miss, wouldn't notice at all. We're really good at doing those things and bringing that all together to create good projects, to complete things in a really successful way, as long as we have that right environment. And we do tend to be conscientious, have good follow through. Again, people depend on us. And I've talked about the empathy. So let me just scroll down just a little bit in case you didn't get the bottom part of this if you are doing a screenshot. But so it's just really important for us to remember how this trait really does help us. And that there are so many of these things that really we don't give consideration sometimes because it's not the squeaky wheel part, right? We understand we're to this, to that. We hear all these statements, but we don't hear a lot of the, oh, I appreciate this about you and this about you and this about you. And that must be because of your high sensitivity. That doesn't come across that way. So it's good for us to remind ourselves, oh, I have all of these skills because of my sensitivity. So then we don't see it as such a burden and we can see it as that superpower. Okay, and then real quickly, I just wanted to note too, before we get into like, how do we manage all of this? That the trait of high sensitivity exists for a reason, and that reason is being like the canary in the coal mine, or those that do pay attention to all those things, notice all of those things, are there for people, all of the stuff that I just talked about. Those skills, those benefits have a place in our evolution, in the world. If we didn't have those, then things wouldn't function very well. And so they've actually identified more than 100 different species besides humans that also show this trait of high sensitivity, and they can show in the same way that, oh, the reason they have this is that, it keeps the herd safe, it keeps everyone together and doing things well, and it makes things work. So if you're ever doubting, like, why am I here doing this? Why do I have this trait? You were chosen, I guess, to be one of those that is going to carry this forward, because it's really helpful. And I would say the way things are going in the world right now, we've never had a better time to have high sensitivity be more recognized and embraced, and for us to step forward and say, okay, I'm going to use these skills, because it's very, very important. All right, lots and lots of talking, but any questions coming up before I move on to now what?
Yes, there's two. One is, can you speak more about the self-doubt or imposter syndrome, especially in overwhelm?
Good. I like the bringing those two together. So we do have a harder time, I would say, not that everyone, I mean, a lot of people have imposter syndrome or self-doubt, but for high sensitivity folks, we tend to go there more because we have this perfectionistic tendency. We tend to want to be really great and seen as great by other people. And so if we compare ourselves to others, that's one of the big factors in the imposter syndrome. We sit back and look and go, well, they do this, this, and this, and they do a great job with that, that, and that. And I don't see myself doing that. I can't do that. There's a lot of that comparison thing. And then we tend to kind of pull back from what our abilities are, because we just don't see them as clearly or believe in ourselves as much. And again, it's not just high sensitivity. It's just a more intense or more frequent experience of that. And so it just is one of those inherent parts of the trait, it seems, to have that piece of self-doubt and saying, oh, well, this feels good, this feels, oh, but yeah, I don't know. And then there's that comparison thing again of like, this person seems to do it better, or I'm supposed to be perfect and I'm not quite perfect, so I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm not the person to go to. So it tends to be very prominent. So if we connect that with overwhelm, we're going to feel that much more quickly. We're going to just kind of give up, feel hopeless if we're not functioning on a full tank, right? If we have, two buckets, we have our own energy and we have all the energy coming in, and we're totally imbalanced like this, or it's like having an empty gas tank. No matter what it is you're trying to do, just like if you don't get enough sleep, things are just not going to work right. You're not going to see things as clearly. And when we get into that overwhelm, sometimes what happens, we have parts in our brain that are functioning for thinking and feeling. And when we get locked into our feeling brain, or that part of us, then the thinking part shuts off. And so when we get into overwhelm, we can get more into that feeling place instead of having that clarity of thought. So we are more likely to doubt ourselves, or to compare more, or to just feel like, I feel so ineffective, or like I can't do anything right. So I'm not as good as people say I am, or as that I want to be. So when we're in that place of overwhelm, all of those experiences are amped up, and that makes it a lot more challenging. Hopefully that answers your question.
The second question is there a segment of the HSP population who might be sensitive to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth? I have uncomfortable physical sensations around it and can't sleep if it's on in the house.
Yes, so there is, so high sensitivity is a spectrum of its own. You can be super high on almost everything. You can be kind of in the middle, but really affected by certain things. You can be even, not even halfway up the scale, but have a few things that really affect you. And those are all different. So for example, I have a really good friend who's very high on the scale of sensitivity, but for her, for whatever reason, noises don't bother her. So we'll go hiking and she'll have this huge, I don't know why she has this, but this huge ring of keys, and she'll have it like clicked on the outside of her backpack or something. We'll start walking and it's just jangling all over, and I'll have to stop and say, oh, wait a second, can we put that inside? And she's like, oh, totally forgot, sorry. And it just doesn't even register for her. But there are other people who, like me, any kind of sound at all, I have a really hard time ignoring. So on this, in the same way, energetic frequencies, especially EMFs that are coming from our phone, our computer, our, the Wi-Fi itself, but also the whole 5G thing, that, everything that's at your neighbor's house. I mean, all of that stuff, we can definitely be more sensitive to. And some of us do have that extra sensory perception, if you will, or experience of those frequencies. So yes, for some, it's really important. Like if you're going to go to sleep at night, turn off your Wi-Fi, turn off, anything, make sure everything's on either off or on airplane mode. Any of that kind of stuff that you do have control over is really, really important. And then there are things that you can do, like taking salt baths, or surrounding yourself with salt, or washing your hands with that or something, to kind of try to break away some of those frequencies, making sure that you're really paying attention to your energy and recharging, getting lots of sleep, all of that. But it is something that some of us are particularly sensitive to. And I can't give you a resource at the moment, but if you reach out and connect with me, I can connect you with an HSP who focuses specifically on environmental sensitivity. So she's got other things to mention that I probably wouldn't come up with, but it's definitely a factor. So if anybody's out there experiencing this, including the person that asked the question, and you think you're kind of weird, or like, oh, this can't possibly be true, rest assured, it can be true. You can be very, very sensitive to those things. Some people end up, just feeling exhausted or having headaches or whatever. And if you do have a blue screen, protector, whatever, I have just a blue screen on my computer at all times. So, and that helps with eyes getting sensitive and tired and that kind of stuff. It's not going to cut out the EMFs, but it helps, for your eyes, and just if you're spending a lot of time on the computer. But I think there are also some products out there that you can, like shields that you can put over you if you have a smart reader or something, or smart, what do they call it, smart meter, for your electricity and your EMFs, or your Wi-Fi and all of that kind of stuff that come into the house. You can create some blocks for those, but it's definitely a real thing. Yeah.
And those are the last questions. Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah. So now we're going to shift into, okay, how do we manage in this world that's too busy, too fast, too loud, just too much? And having about a half hour or so, I'm going to hit all these points, about 9 different categories that I actually take everyone through on my signature online course. Very thorough, everything. So I'm going to go through kind of in that order, which I think is not necessarily order of importance, but kind of like starting here, we need to have this to build upon as we go. So it's obviously, we're not diving deep because we don't have all that much time. But if you do want to jump in between each of these as we go, Laurel, that I'm totally fine answering some questions so that we don't get too far, ahead and lose track of those.
Okay.
But, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the nervous system. And I have talked about this. I talked on Tuesday, and I mentioned a little bit today, but not specifically. Our nervous system, to start with, because of our high sensitivity, and we are wired this way, we're born this way, we have differences in our brain that process things in a different way. And so our nervous systems start, if you think about, okay, so you're born and you start your day and you go off how everything is going, and your nervous system starts here. And so you can take in all of this stuff before it's really, too troublesome. Our nervous systems start up higher. Like we're already amped up quite a ways because we're just constantly taking things in, being that, giant sponge without all those filters. It's all coming in constantly. And so our nervous system is already trying to manage a whole lot more than everyone else. So we really can have that tendency toward being in fight or flight, freeze or fawn mode a high percentage of the time, if not all of the time, if we're not really taking care of our nervous system. And then if our nervous system is amped up and we're just in that fight or flight mode, constantly scrambling, trying to feel safe, then we don't have any bandwidth left for anything else. We're just in self-preservation mode all the time. And that itself is really exhausting. So it's super important to do as much as we possibly can to calm the nervous system. So that looks like anything that allows you to be in the moment, in the present, and shutting everything else out and just being. So anything that's a mindful practice, that's like meditation, or it could be just walking in the forest, as long as you are very clear that you are not thinking and problem solving. You're just being in the moment, noticing. If so, you can do a walking meditation, you can be out in the forest, but paying attention to what your feet feel like on the ground. What do you hear rustling in the trees or birds? What do you hear out here? What do you see? Paying attention to your senses, so you're really in that moment instead of thinking. Because that's one of the things my big go-to is hiking, but I can still catch myself out there thinking, problem solving something, and I'll be like, whoa, hold on, I'm in the forest, let's pay attention to the forest. And then I come back and regroup. So making sure that you're just stopping thinking as a general part of your day, whether that's starting off with a meditation or a breathing exercise or yoga, or something that helps you to stop planning, thinking, worrying, thinking anything about the past, anything about the future. That's when we kick into our fight or flight, when we're worrying about anything that has happened or will happen or could happen, and then we're not in the present anymore. And then our nervous systems just really amp up. And then we've got all that other stuff coming in, and we're just not going to have the bandwidth for it all. So even though we can have a conscious understanding of this, the majority of people that come to me at the very beginning have almost no self-care plan, consistent. Yes, I've done yoga. Yes, I've done, breathing exercises. Yes, I love to get out in nature. How often do you do all these things? Oh, now and then. And it really is necessary to make this a commitment to yourself every single day, to have some kind of practice that, and not just one thing during the day, but at least that one thing. Start your day with something that allows you to regroup, allows you to be calm and not be thinking, and calm that nervous system. But then also to have a plan throughout your entire day that you pay attention to what's going on with your body. And when you start to feel yourself get amped up, then do something to calm that down, instead of waiting till the end of the day and saying, okay, when I have the time, then, and I'm done with my workday, or I'm done with all of these responsibilities, then I'll take a little breather. We need to do that as we go, so that we don't hit that place and crash, and then we're just trying to scramble to get back. So that's just so very powerful and important. And we really need to make that effort, which is a lot of times why I'm working with people as a coach, because they need that accountability to make that happen, because they're not doing it on their own. And it can seem like something easy, like, oh, all I need to do is, these few things, and then I'll feel better. But making it happen is the challenge, especially when we highly sensing people are focused on helping, and making sure everyone else is taken care of, and fulfilling all of our duties at work, and wanting to be the best, and all of those things, are competing for our energy and our time. And then we put ourselves on the back burner. So that's really challenging. So the secondary aspect of that is self-care in general. We need the stuff that's going to calm that nervous system, number one. But even beyond that, we still need a broader sense of self-care, where we give ourselves the honor that says we are as important as anyone else out there, anyone we're taking care of, anyone we're responsible for. We are just as important. It's put on your oxygen mask before you can help others. And that makes sense again up here, but in reality, we get going and we tend to put ourselves last. So as a part of our self-care plan, we need to make it a priority, just like any other to-do on your list. And we can start with things like meditation or breathing, or things that keep us in the moment. But there are also other things, like just taking breaks throughout the day. And generally speaking, if you don't do this already, you need to actually schedule it in your planner, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever it is, on that schedule, so that when it comes to that time, you say, oh, this is the time I'm supposed to take care of me. And then you can do it. Because if you wait until you just have a moment here or 15 minutes there, it's not going to happen. So making that commitment to yourself, to your self-care, Because ultimately, even if that seems selfish to you or anyone else, if you hear that story, oh, that's selfish to take all that time. If you don't do that, then you are not the person you want to be for everyone else. And this is true for not just highly sensitives, but again, because we get, amped up so much more easily, we really need to be dedicated to this. So we need to take care of us, and then we can be who we want to be so we can take care of others or our responsibilities or whatever it is that we're needing to do. So other things for self-care can be, sure, they can be the obvious things like, getting a massage once in a while, or taking a nice soaking bath, or taking a trip somewhere, or something like that. That's maybe seems like extras and you're not going to do it all the time. But even on a day-to-day basis, we can have those times where we say, wow, a lot of stuff is getting to me right now. I'm going to take 5 minutes and go walk around the block, or go sit in the bathroom, by myself and meditate, or have, a little breathing session or something. Or I'm going to take 15 minutes out and go read something fun so my brain shuts off. Those kinds of things are also part of a self-care plan that's really strong, is just taking that time to regroup, reset. And the extra piece of that is trying to really focus on, sometimes this takes a lot of work, to not feel guilty about doing it, especially on work time. And so some people who either work for themselves and they don't punch a clock or whatever, or they're in management, or they're in some kind of a role where they feel like they need to be super accountable for their time, even taking a full lunch hour and not working during that time, even if that's part of what, you're not paid for that hour, you have this lunch break. And yet people will tend to say, oh yeah, well, I get these things done while I'm eating. Well, that's not a break. It's just not. You're completely engaged. You're still in that fight or flight. I got to get this done, or all these 3 things are competing right now while I'm eating. And so for one, you're not going to get the full benefit of the nutrition from your food, because you're circumventing it with all of that stress. And then the other is that you're not having a break. You're not getting away from things. So those kinds of things are really important, saying, yes, I do need to take my downtime. If you work for someone that's, say, in the, county or government, or a big corporation or something, you're supposed to get, I don't even know what it is, like a half-hour break if you work over 6 or 7 hours or whatever. And then in between there, you get those 10-minute breaks, right? That's actually something that the government says this is necessary. So if you think about it that way, even if you're not in a role like that says, oh yeah, you need to have these breaks and go clock out or whatever, it's really important. It's recognized. So it's even more important for us to be able to regroup and have that time. So take your breaks, take extra breaks if you can. I was talking with someone this morning about, she was asking questions like, how do highly sensitive people address networking events? And one of the things we talked about was one thing that's really important is to not schedule yourself back to back appointments, because it's just a lot for us. So working to change your schedule, even sometimes, to have these big windows where you have time, you might still be working emails, writing on a project or whatever, but you're not like engaged in these meetings, constantly one after another. That's really, really draining. So looking at your schedule and deciding, what kind of boundaries you can set there, really, really important. So nervous system and self-care, no matter what, that's where we always need to start if we want to make changes or enjoy life more as highly sensing people. Okay, so I'm going to talk about energy and emotions. Are there any questions so far on that, Laurel?
Nope.
Okay, so energy is a big factor with high sensitivity that people are often challenged by, frustrated with, don't know where to go. I'll have people come in and say, I don't know what to do with all this energy. So it's really important to acknowledge that, yes, we pick up on energy like crazy, and it can be really challenging. And don't think that that's just some woo-woo thing or something that it shouldn't bother you because it's not like real, tangible. Energy is really powerful. Everything is energy. Our thoughts are energy. Our feelings are energy. The things that we're sitting on, they seem hard, but they're just an energy frequency. Our bodies are frequencies, where everything is energy. So if we have our own energy system and we're amped up more than average without all these tools, and even when we have them, we can get more amped, more easily. When we have access to, if you will, all these other energies that are trying to come into our field, and they do that easily if we're not really aware, then, I mean, we're just these giant balls of frenetic energy all the time. How are we supposed to feel calm and relaxed and at ease? Because there's so much energy. So part of that is being aware and acknowledging, yes, this is real. I really am feeling, you know, I walk into the room and I go, wow, this is heavy. There's something major going on here. Or you're talking with one particular person and you pick up, you know, some big energy thing with that person, or whatever it is, you're more likely to pick up on all of this stuff. So if we're not really aware and conscious, purposeful with our energy, we'll suck all that up. And then again, we don't have the bandwidth because it's just too much. So one thing that can be really helpful is starting your day, maybe it's after your meditation or breathing, or, you know, after you've kind of gotten everything ready and you're just ready to head off to work or head off to the computer or whatever, to have a moment where you say, okay, I'm being purposeful with this. Here's my energy. And we, you know, we each have an energy bubble. They've actually tested this, and it actually looks like, they call it toric. It has looks like an apple as it comes out like this. And for average people, it's somewhere, you know, 8 to 12 feet out. So if you think about it, if you're in a room with a lot of people that are in smaller than that, then you're really sucking up all of that energy. But, you know, we can bring that in, push that out, what the parameters are around that energy, and say, okay, I'm like really, really at my end of bandwidth today. I can't allow anything more in. So you're likely maybe to say, I'm going to draw in my field, and then be very purposeful that you have some kind of a barrier or a boundary, something that you're aware of, that you have this intention, and saying, only what I allow in can come into my field. Everything else just bounces off and goes away. And have that, and it sounds too simplistic, but it's very powerful, because our intention is also energy, and everything comes from our intention. So whether that's subconscious beliefs that we're not even aware of, or our conscious thoughts, we have that intention of what we're putting out there. And if we say, nope, I'm not taking anyone else's energy, period. I can't do it. And then other times you can have like a semi-permeable mesh, kind of is how I always envision it, boundary around yourself, where you say, okay, these people that I already know, that I'm getting along with, that are really good for me, supportive, their energy can come in, that's fine. All of my energy goes out, no extra effort needed. I don't have to think about it, that's all fine. But anything that's unwanted, anything unknown, anything that's potentially stressful for me is absolutely not allowed in, and that will just bounce off and leave. And I'm not going to own that. I'm not going to take it into my field to deal with. It's just not going to come in. And again, that sounds really simplistic, but if we have that intention and awareness, it really can be very helpful. Now, sometimes that means if we reach a certain point and we just feel like we can't bring any more in, especially if it's somebody else's energy, sometimes we do have to modify our activities. You know, maybe you were planning a dinner that night with someone and you were super excited about it, and it's a really positive thing. And yet, you know, if you go to a restaurant with all of this extra energy around you, you're just going to come home and exhausted and not function at all. And maybe it means saying, oh, I really want to spend time with you. Can we do this just at one of our houses or at the park or somewhere where there's not other people around? So being very aware and setting up our environment when we have the ability to control things in a way that doesn't bring in that extra energy, so that we aren't just completely overwhelmed. So similarly to the energy idea is our emotions. And that can be really challenging for us to manage. But again, paying attention to what is ours and what is someone else's, and being really clear with that intention of not owning someone else's feelings, or in our case, quite often feeling responsible for someone else's feelings or helping them feel better, and putting that ahead of what we need to feel okay, it's really important to have that distinction and that focus and that commitment to ourselves. We have that level of compassion, that empathy. Usually we're really good at knowing what people want or need, And so we want to go there and be there for them. It does not mean that we need to own those feelings or feel them as how they're feeling in order to help them. And quite often, I kind of alluded to this a little bit at the beginning, but if we give of ourselves so much and put ourselves in that place where we're struggling just as much as the person that we're trying to help, we are not going to be effective. It's just not possible, because then we're not the person that we want to be, that has the energy and the love and everything that we want to offer, because we're depleted. So it never helps to struggle along with someone or to suffer with someone out of compassion or empathy. So if we can take a step back and say, wow, this person is really, really struggling. What do they need? Identify those things. And then say, okay, I'm feeling some anger. I'm feeling some fear. I'm feeling, what is this mine? Or am I picking this up from someone else? And that's another one place where when you go in and just really get that felt sense in your body, listen to that intuition, listen to what your body is telling you. How does this feel? Does this even feel like mine? And if you identify that, I don't even know where this came from, it's probably not yours. Or if you realize that, yeah, as soon as I started talking to this person about what's going on with them, then I started feeling this heavy sadness, this big drain, et cetera. And then you know that you're picking that up from someone else, and you can be clear about separating that and say, oh, I don't have to own those feelings. I have my own. And then the other piece is acknowledging whatever your feelings are, even if they're really intense. And as I mentioned, sometimes we try to, dampen down our feelings because they are so intense. But feelings are just feelings. They're not good or bad, right or wrong. They're just there as gatekeepers and flags. They're like telling us, oh, you have this feeling, so something's going on for you to be aware of. So if we just see them as the messengers that they're never bad. We might not like them. They might be awkward or uncomfortable. But if we just acknowledge that it's okay that we have whatever feeling that we're having, and that it's pretty intense, especially compared, and again, there's that comparison thing, with someone else who seems totally unaffected by a situation, or they had this maybe a somewhat intense experience, but then 5 minutes later they're done with it and they've moved on, and you're just struggling so much with that deep sadness or anger or frustration, whatever it is. Just acknowledging that, oh yeah, that's me. I'm wired that way. I feel really deeply, really intensely. That's okay. And honoring it. And then being aware that, first of all, whatever you're going through is temporary. So that's always a good thing to remind yourself when you're locked into some emotion. It's like, oh, this is temporary. It's okay that this feeling is here. Thank you you can tell your body, your system, thank you for the message. I'm paying attention now. What do I need to know about this? And then see again, touch in with your intuition. What is it telling you? Maybe there's an action that you can take. Maybe there's I'm taking on something that's not mine. Whatever it is, it's a message. And then it's okay to give permission for it to release. You do not have to hold on to it. And sometimes we can get into that mode of saying, well, if I let go of this, that I'm telling myself or I'm telling the world that it really wasn't that important to start with. If it was that intense for me, I wouldn't be able to just let it go, like so many other people seem to be able to do. They just let it go. But that's not the reality either. It can be super, super intense, and then we can give it permission, and then we can release it. And it doesn't negate our experience or say anything negative about us if we are able to let it go. So that's one thing to focus on too. It's just that permission, giving permission for that to happen. Okay, so see if we can fit all the rest of this in. Mindset is really, really important. And I mean, this is a whole topic for hours that we could focus on, but anytime that you catch yourself thinking about not being good enough, not being perfect, being different because of your sensitivity, someone said something to you that was really hurtful, any of those things that you have a reaction to, whatever that feeling is that comes up, or your action, anything that comes from that comes from what you're telling yourself about that situation or that scenario. So anytime that we can be aware of what we're telling ourselves, then we can shift that, and then that has a different response. So as a simple example, if you come upon or you're in an area and then some kind of accident happens. Let's say it's a car accident or something, and there's two people there, and one person sees it. You're both seeing the exact same thing, right? So one person sees it, they say, "Oh, that was really unfortunate." How I can imagine how hard that would be for everyone involved. And then they move on, and then the rest of the day is okay because they've said something to themselves about, wow, that was really unfortunate. I'm glad it wasn't me. I hope everyone's okay. Someone's going to take care of that, and I'm going to go my way. And then the other person watching the exact same thing can have the response of, that was so incredibly horrible. And then they think about all of these different things and what it means. And then they're going on and on and on about it. And it means something, just like, it means I'm not safe. I can't ever drive in a car again, because what if this happens to me, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Two very different responses to the exact same event. So we can get really caught up in those what ifs and these potential scenarios, or the meaning that we give it, that can make things really, really difficult for us. So if we can be aware that, okay, so I'm really having a strong reaction to this. This is really hard for me. What am I telling myself about it? Because as highly sensitives, we give meaning to everything, and a lot of meaning, and quite often equal meaning to things. So it is harder to let go of things, or to not go, oh, but we have all these what ifs and these potentials that aren't good. But again, there's all these potentials that are good. And if we recognize, oh, I'm telling myself that because this happened to so-and-so, it's likely to happen to me. The reality is that there's no connection there whatsoever. So maybe I can let go of that and say, oh, that was unfortunate. I'm glad it didn't happen to me. I'm sorry it happened to that person, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. And then that resulting feeling is completely different. So that's a very simplified version of mindset and where you would go with that, but very important to be looking at what we're telling ourselves because of all that meaning that we give to everything. And then another really, really powerful one, which again, I could spend hours on, is boundaries. And that can be really challenging for highly sensing people because again, we're people pleasing quite often. We don't want anyone to be upset with us. We don't want other people to be upset. So we have a hard time saying no, whether that's, okay, sure, I'll do one more project at work before I go home, or I really wanted to go home and relax, but my friend wants me to come over and, chit chat for a while or help her with some issue she's got. I really don't have the energy, but she's my friend. Okay, I'll go. So any of these, situations where you do more than you need to, that for you to be okay, those are the boundaries that we really need to practice putting in place and maintaining. And we do end up with backlash sometimes if we have someone that's always pushing things and we keep saying no, keep saying yes, agreeing and not saying no. And then suddenly we say, I'm not going to do that anymore. And we start saying no, there can be some backlash because they're thrown off. Suddenly the way they do things isn't working and they're going to push back on that. So just being aware when we do set those boundaries, sometimes it's not necessarily like, oh, that just makes everything all better magically. But super important to look at what those boundaries are and give ourselves permission and recognize that we need to have those, again, so that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can be who we want to be for everyone else. And then relationships, that's another big topic, but one of the things that's really important within relationships is allowing ourselves to share what life is like for us, what our experiences are like for us with others, not expecting them to get it at the level that we do, but so that they can understand that there is a reason for what we do and how we do it. So if you have an inventory that you can say, hey, this is me, can you take this? Can you look at this? And I scored this number, on this. And let's talk about some of these specific points in here about what high sensitivity is. We can do that as a way of sharing. We can also say, hey, I know we see things very differently. This is what this situation is like for me. And then from a very neutral, heartfelt place, just explain, this is my understanding without judging, without pointing fingers, etc. And then say, what's it like for you? And then have them do the same thing. And then, first it's just the realization of how different those viewpoints are. So each of you has that understanding. It's like, oh, well, no wonder we butt heads on this because we see how differently we see these things. And then that helps us to be a little more understood or accepted, or at least having that person understand that we're not just trying to be difficult. But it also gives us the part that a lot of people don't talk about in terms of high sensitivity. It's like, yes, it's great to be understood, but it's also important to realize that what other people do toward us, as it feels disrespectful, hurtful, whatever, is not necessarily, coming from that intention. It's just from a completely different viewpoint that's not highly sensitive. And so what they do that doesn't seem like a big deal, if someone did that to them, they'd be like, no, I wouldn't care. And you're just crushed by it. It's not because they don't care about you or are disrespecting you. They just don't see it the same way, and they don't experience it the same way. So being able to have that dialogue with people is really important for relationships. So as kind of a wrap up, looking at just ways that we can honor ourselves and our trait for what it is as a gift, that we can say, yes, I am a highly sensing person. And because of that, I have all these amazing things to give to the world. And so instead of saying, I need to not be this way, I need to hide my sensitivity, I need to not let anyone know things affect me, shifting that focus and reframing to, I see things differently than, say, 70 to 80% of the population. And here's how that is amazing. And where we butt heads, here's how I can explain what it's like for me and let people know what I need to be supported or how I would like things to go. And then have that dialogue coming from a place of like, hey, this is the way I'm wired. You're wired differently. Everyone, has their own experience of life. We're all unique. But in my case, like 20 to 30% of the rest of the population, this is what life is like for me. How can we make this work? Because I'm totally okay this way, being highly sensing. So let me share that with you, and we'll see how we can make that work. So just stepping into that place of honoring and having that power of saying, yep, here's me as a highly sensing person, and I'm going to let that shine in all of these ways. So that's always my ultimate goal, is to help people with that, to find that place within them that can say, yep, no matter what, I'm okay, and I'm going to let these benefits shine. Okay, well, are there any questions to follow up on any of that?
Not so far. You can quickly enter your question in chat or Q&A if you have one. But I think people are probably processing all the information that you just gave them, which is...
I know it was a ton for such a short amount of time. So it's probably one of those things to, since there's a recording, that's great. You can go back and do, oh, let's just do that section and let's do that section. And of course, again, it's just scratching the surface on all of these places. But there is so much we can do to really embrace who we are and stop trying to be different, but using our tools and looking at it as, where do we go from here? How is this going to be, amazing, and get rid of that idea that we need to be any different. And that's challenging when we hear things like, you need to be this, you need to stop doing that, just, get a thicker skin, just don't worry about it. I mean, how many times has anybody here today heard that? It's like, don't worry about it, it's no big deal. Well, yeah, I'm not sure how to do that. Just let it go. Well, okay. So it definitely takes practice, but just acknowledging that, yeah, that's the way we process things, and we're wired that way, and that's that. So let's do something with it so that it becomes our superpower.
Yeah, I love that. I love the here's what to do instead of just stopping. And there is one question here. How do you approach situations in which you've tried to set a boundary and someone is probably unknowingly saying or doing things that you feel like push on that?
Mm-hmm. So part of it is checking in with yourself, whether that's meditation or just sitting with yourself before you approach that situation or that person, making sure that you're feeling calm and you're coming from a solid place, and then addressing it with that person to say, hey, I know this might be different or uncomfortable or whatever, but this is really important for me. You can share why, you don't have to, but the main thing is just to keep at it. And sometimes we need to find different ways to do that, to say, okay, well, I'm saying this and that's not being heard. So maybe there's a different way I can say it or approach it. But part of it, again, is just if you're making a big change, you'll either get pushback or people will circumvent and, you know, try something else. And so it's easy to just go, oh, it's too much work. But sticking with it and saying, nope, this is important because I'm important and I want to be who I want to be for everyone else. So this is what I need to do. But yeah, sometimes it's just saying, okay, let me see if there's a workaround here, a different way to approach it. But a lot of times it's really important to just have that conversation and say, you know, I know this might not make sense to you, or you might not like this or whatever, but this is something I need to do for me. And, you know, this is what it is, and they can like it or not, they can get upset or not. That's not our responsibility. You know, I mean, obviously, if we're going to be attacking them and, you know, using language that's going to upset them, we're responsible for that. But if we come from a neutral, heartfelt place and just say, hey, I need to share what my needs are, and I need to have them met in this way, and then keep at it until that works. Although, you know, sometimes I didn't talk about this because I didn't have time, but there's that piece of sometimes we do need to distance ourselves from certain people or interactions or situations and just say, you know what, this just doesn't work for me. Or the way it's happening now isn't working. I can try this, and this, but ultimately, if that's not going to work, you know, I need to just say no. And sometimes we do need to say no to friendships. We can't do that in family situations, but we can have acquaintances or friends or whatever when we realize they're just not healthy for us, and we've set all these boundaries and they're not listening, and you brought it up and they're still not listening. And then sometimes we just have to say, yeah, this is too much energy. It's a big drain on me. I'm not getting enough of the benefit out of it. I need to say, no, thank you, no. Yeah.
And another question was about highly sensing with children. And I do want to give a shout out that Tammy is going to be giving 2 presentations at the library in October. And one of them is I'll include this in the follow-up email to all of you, but one of them is on October 5th at Downtown Bend in the evening, parenting as a highly sensing person. And then October 10th, parenting highly sensitive children. So I will make sure to send links to both of those. But Tammy is also going to be talking about that, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, and it is a really good, important topic, because there are things, and the reason why I have split that up into parenting and then the actual, you know, the children that are highly sensing, is because a lot of the focus as parents can be outside of whether the children are highly sensitive or not. But all those things that we just talked about being that much more important to have a handle on if you're going to be parenting, because things are going to push your buttons, you know, they're going to trigger you, whether they're highly sensing or not, you know, the children, you need to really be solid in all of these things so that you don't just get completely wiped out as a highly sensing parent. And then highly sensitive children, if you have a greater awareness of high sensitivity, then you can be a better support for your children who are highly sensing, and recognize what their needs might be and their struggles might be, and helping them to, again, you know, give them the tools so that they can feel supported, so that they can shine and not spend, you know, their whole childhood trying to not be so sensitive, but saying, oh, if I do this, this, and this, then I can be totally fine with this. And, you know, how is that going to help me? And help them grow up in that environment. So yeah, it's a big topic, and I'm looking forward to those presentations too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. We've gotten a lot of thank you, Tammy. So I'll pass those on to you later, Tammy. But
Awesome.
Really appreciate this, just and a positive approach to it, Tammy, and real tangible steps. So I hope you all joining can maybe send this link when it comes out to someone you know, so that, you know, they can learn more about you or more about themselves. And if you have any questions for me, you can respond to that email. And there were requests for the slide that you had, Tammy. So I'll try to send that out to all the registrants as well. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.